4-year-old homeless girl sees millionaire kicked out of church after confession, but what she does next shocks everyone. Watch until the end, you won't regret it. Comment what you think will happen, your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt of Harmony Park in Willow Creek when Izzy opened another trash bag behind the Sacred Heart Church. Her small, dirty fingers rummaged through leftovers and crumpled papers, looking for something to quell the hunger that had tormented her for 2 days. At 4 years old, the little girl already knew every corner of that small town in upstate New York. Every trash can that might offer some food, every person who would cross the street to avoid her. She was focused on separating a piece of moldy bread when she heard raised voices coming from inside the church. Curious, Izzy approached the slightly open door, hiding behind one of the dark wooden pews. What she saw made her freeze in place. Father Michael, a short and kind man who always gave her a smile when he met her around town, was standing before the confessional with a face as white as a sheet. In front of him, kneeling on the cold church floor, was Walter Sterling, the owner of Sterling Hardware, whom she knew by sight. The 62-year-old man was crying like a child, his hands trembling as he held a rosary between his fingers. "I can't carry this alone anymore, Father," Walter's voice echoed through the church walls. "It's been 3 decades of lies, 3 decades pretending to be someone I'm not." The priest tried to compose himself, but his hands were also shaking. "Walter, what you're telling me is that I killed an entire family that night," Walter interrupted, his voice breaking with pain. "The Johnsons, Jim, his wife, their 2 little kids, all because of me. And since then, I've pretended to be a good man in this town when I'm actually a murderer." Izzy didn't fully understand the meaning of those words, but she felt the weight of sadness that filled the room. She saw Father Michael step away from Walter, his features twisted by shock and horror. I can't. This goes beyond any forgiveness I can offer," Father Michael murmured, the words coming with difficulty. "You need to go to the authorities, Walter. You need to do the right thing." "I know, Father, but first I needed to tell someone. I needed at least one person to know the truth." What happened next was even more shocking than the confession. Father Michael, the man who preached about love and forgiveness every Sunday, pointed to the church door with a firm hand. "Get out of here, Walter. Get out and don't come back. I can't have someone like you defiling this sacred place." Walter rose slowly, as if each movement cost a superhuman effort. His steps echoed through the empty nave as he walked toward the exit. When he reached the door, the priest shouted after him, "May God have mercy on your soul, because I can't." The door slammed shut with a crash that reverberated throughout the church. Izzy saw Walter stumble on the marble steps and fall to his knees on the sidewalk, sobbing as she had never seen an adult cry. The people passing through the park began to move away from him, whispering among themselves, as if they could sense that something terrible had happened. The man stayed there, prostrate on the sidewalk for long minutes. Izzy watched from the shadow of the church, holding the piece of bread she had found in the trash against her chest. Something inside her, a compassion that defied her young age and her own needs, made her make a decision that would change everything. Slowly, her bare feet making soft noises on the hot concrete, she approached the fallen man. Walter raised his red and swollen eyes when he felt a presence nearby. What he saw made him even more confused. A small, dirty and thin girl, but with eyes that shone with a kindness he hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you sad, mister?" Izzy asked in her thin voice, extending the piece of bread toward him. "Do you want a little? It's all I have today, but I can share." Walter stared at that child, offering her only meal to a stranger who had just confessed to the most terrible crime. The contrast between his own confessed evil and the pure kindness of that girl struck him like lightning. His tears intensified, but now there was something different in them, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you, little one," he managed to say, delicately taking the bread from her tiny hands. "But you need it more than I do. Mama always said that when we share, it multiplies," Izzy replied, sitting down next to him on the sidewalk. "She went to heaven, but I still remember what she taught." At that moment, as the sun began to set over Willow Creek, two completely opposite worlds met on the sidewalk in front of the Sacred Heart Church. A man destroyed by the weight of a terrible secret, and an abandoned girl who still believed in the goodness of the world. Neither of them could imagine that this impromptu meeting would be just the beginning of a journey that would test the limits of forgiveness, redemption, and love. The first stars began to appear in the sky when Walter finally got up, helping Izzy to her feet as well. "What's your name, little one?" "Izzy, what's yours?" "Walter." He paused, looking at the church from which he had been expelled. "Izzy, do you have a place to sleep tonight?" The girl pointed to a park bench where she had improvised a bed with old newspapers. The sight broke Walter's already shattered heart, and he made a decision that would further complicate his already destroyed life. Walter looked at the improvised bench where Izzy would spend another night in the open air and felt something break inside him. The girl was already walking towards her room when he called her. "Izzy, wait!" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Would you like to sleep in a real bed tonight?" The girl turned around, her big eyes shining with a mixture of distrust and hope. "Do you have an extra bed?" "I do." Walter swallowed hard. Offering shelter to a street child when he had just confessed to a terrible crime seemed like the perfect recipe for more trouble. But something in the way she had shared her only food with a stranger prevented him from simply walking away. Walter's house was only 3 blocks from the park, an old 2-story building with stone walls and wooden windows painted faded blue. Izzy followed him in silence, her small feet trying to keep up with the man's long strides. "I've lived alone for a long time," he explained, as he opened the rusty gate. "So it might be a little messy." The house wasn't just messy, it was abandoned by human care. Dirty dishes piled up in the kitchen sink, clothes scattered on the furniture, and a layer of dust covered practically everything. Izzy, however, looked around with genuine admiration. "It's very pretty," she said, gently touching a cracked leather armchair. "It must be nice to live in a real house." Walter watched her explore his living room carefully, as if afraid of breaking something. "How long have you lived on the street, Izzy?" "Since Mama went to heaven. She got very sick and the doctors couldn't make her better." The girl spoke without apparent sadness, as if she had already accepted her reality. "I tried to stay in the house where we lived, but the landlady said a child can't live alone." "And your father?" "I never knew him. Mama said he left before I was born." Izzy stopped in front of a framed photograph on the bookshelf, a younger Walter next to an elegant woman and a teenage boy. "Is that your family, Mr. Walter?" The man felt his chest tighten. "It was. My wife Clara and my son Braulio. She passed away 15 years ago, and he lives far away now." "Why does he live far away?" The simple question struck Walter like a dagger. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that his son had distanced himself because he couldn't bear to live with the guilt and isolation he carried? That Braulio had grown up seeing his father wither in silence without ever understanding why. "Sometimes people need to leave," was all he could say. Izzy nodded with the seriousness of someone who understood loss, like Mama. That night, Walter prepared a warm bath for Izzy and found an old T-shirt that served as a nightgown. When she came out of the bathroom with her hair wet and clean, she looked like a completely different child. Her delicate features were finely visible without the dirt, revealing a girl of simple beauty who carried in her eyes a disturbing maturity. "I can sleep on the couch," she offered. "I'm used to hard places." "There's a guest room upstairs," Walter replied. Well, there's a bed." The room had belonged to Braulio during his teenage years. The walls still displayed posters of old bands and dusty soccer trophies. Walter made the bed with sheets that smelled of mothballs, feeling the weight of the irony. He was offering his absent son's room to an abandoned girl. "Mr. Walter," Izzy said when he was about to leave, "thank you for letting me stay here. It's been a long time since I slept in a bed." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. Mama always said that gratitude is the most important thing in the world. Even when things are bad, there's always something to be grateful for." Walter stood at the door, watching the girl snuggle between the blankets. "Your mother seemed like a special person." She was. She was a nurse at the hospital and took care of people who were sick. She said that God gave her healing hands. Izzy closed her eyes. "I think God forgot to heal her too." When Walter went downstairs to the living room, the house seemed different. There was life in it for the first time in years. The soft sound of Izzy's breathing upstairs created a presence that he had forgotten how comforting it was. But along with that feeling came panic. What was he doing? He had just confessed to causing the death of an entire family, and now he had a child under his roof. If anyone found out, they would interpret it in all the wrong ways. They would say he was trying to buy forgiveness through charity, or worse, they might suspect his intentions. Walter spent the night pacing the living room, fighting contradictory impulses. Part of him wanted to wake Izzy up and take her back to the park before anyone saw them together. Another part, which he did not recognize in himself, felt a connection with that girl who had shown more compassion in 5 minutes than he had received in decades. At dawn, he went to the kitchen and tried to prepare something like breakfast. His culinary skills were limited, but he managed to make scrambled eggs and toast, putting everything on plates that he washed especially for the occasion. Izzy came downstairs slowly, still wearing the oversized t-shirt, but with her hair combed with her fingers. "Good morning, Mr. Walter." "Good morning. I hope you slept well. Better than in a long time." She sat at the kitchen table and looked at the food with wide eyes. "Is this all for me?" "For both of us." They ate in comfortable silence until loud knocks on the door interrupted the morning tranquility. Walter felt his stomach clench. Who could be knocking on his door so early? What if it was someone who had seen Izzy enter his house the night before? "Stay here," he said to the girl, who was watching him with growing concern. When he opened the door, he found Mirtes Silva, a nurse from the hospital he knew by sight. She was a 45-year-old woman with black hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to see through people. She wore her white uniform and carried a fabric bag. "Mr. Sterling," she said without preamble, "I need to talk to you about the girl." Walter's heart raced. "What girl?" "The one you brought home last night. Izzy." Mirtes stared at him with determination. "Half the town already knows. In small towns, news travels fast." Walter felt the world collapsing around him. It was all over before it even started. Walter recoiled instinctively from the door, his face as pale as paper. "I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything to me," Mirtes interrupted, gently pushing the door open to enter. "I came here to help." The statement caught Walter completely off guard. "Help? I've known Izzy for months. She always shows up around the hospital, looking for food in the kitchen garbage. I've tried to approach her several times, but she always ran away." Mirtes entered the room and looked around. "When I heard she was here, I thought that finally someone had given her what she needs." "Mr. Walter, who is it?" Izzy's voice echoed from the kitchen. "It's Mirtes from the hospital," he replied, still processing the situation. Izzy appeared in the kitchen doorway, still holding a piece of toast. When she saw Mirtes, her eyes lit up with recognition. "You're the pretty lady who always wears white." Mirtes smiled, and for the first time, Walter saw softness in her rigid features. "That's right, honey. And you're Izzy, aren't you?" The girl nodded shyly. "Did you come to get me?" "No, I came to see how you're doing." Mirtes knelt down to be at Izzy's height. "Can I examine you? I'm a nurse, and I want to make sure everything is okay." "Is she sick?" Walter asked, alarmed. "I don't know. That's why I need to examine her." Mirtes opened her bag and took out a stethoscope. It's just a quick checkup, Izzy. It won't hurt. For the next few minutes, Myrtis examined Izzy with professional care. She checked her temperature, listened to her heart and lungs, looked at her throat, and palpated her lymph nodes. Walter watched tensely, noting how the nurse frowned occasionally. "All right, honey," Myrtis said finally, putting away the stethoscope. "You can finish your breakfast." Izzy ran back to the kitchen, and Myrtis motioned for Walter to step away to talk in private. "She's malnourished, but we expected that," Myrtis murmured. "What worries me is her heart. There's a murmur that shouldn't be there." "What does that mean?" "It could be nothing, or it could be something serious. She needs more detailed exams." Myrtis stared directly at him. "Mr. Sterling, why did you bring her home?" The simple question carried a weight that Walter didn't know how to bear. How to explain that a child had offered her only meal to a stranger at the worst moment of his life. How to say that for the first time in decades he had felt something akin to purpose. "She was sleeping in the park," was all he could manage. "A lot of kids sleep in the park." "You've never helped any before." Walter looked out the window, seeing Izzy through the kitchen door. "Yesterday was a difficult day. She showed up at the right time." Myrtis studied his expression. "Or maybe you showed up at the right time for her." "Does the whole town know already?" he asked, changing the subject. "Mrs. Higgins saw you two going in last night. She's already told half the neighborhood." Myrtis sighed. "Mr. Sterling, you know people are going to talk, don't you? They're going to question your motivations." "I know." He closed his eyes. "Maybe it's better if I take her back to the park." "No." The firmness in Myrtis' voice surprised him. "That girl needs medical care, regular food, and a safe place to sleep. If you're willing to offer that, then this is where she should stay." "But what about the gossip? What if someone calls Child Protective Services?" "Then we'll deal with it when it happens." Myrtis picked up her bag. "For now, I'll arrange the tests for Izzy. I know a cardiologist in New York City who can see her pro bono." "Why are you doing this?" Walter asked. "You don't even know me." Myrtis paused at the door, her expression becoming distant. "Because I've seen kids like Izzy before, and I know what happens to them when no one cares." After Myrtis left, Walter found Izzy washing her dishes in the kitchen sink. The sight of the small girl stretching to reach the faucet touched him deeply. "You don't have to wash the dishes," he said. "Mama always said that whoever eats also helps clean up." Izzy continued scrubbing a plate with determination. "Mr. Walter, did the lady from the hospital say that I have to have tests?" "Maybe, just to make sure you're healthy." "I am. I just get a little tired sometimes." She finished washing the last plate and turned to him. "Can I stay here today too?" The innocent question hit Walter squarely. The girl wasn't just asking for shelter, she was asking to be part of his life. And despite all the fears and complications that would bring, he found that he wanted to say yes. "You can stay as long as you want," he replied. The smile that lit up Izzy's face was worth all the trouble that was to come. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Izzy explored the house with respectful curiosity, asking questions about common objects as if they were rare treasures. Walter watched her, amazed at how she found wonder in simple things. "Mr. Walter, does this machine make coffee by itself?" she asked, pointing to the electric coffee maker. "It does. Do you want to see how it works?" They spent an hour in the kitchen with Walter explaining the workings of basic appliances. Izzy absorbed each piece of information as if she were learning about magic. It was during this casual conversation that the first real complication appeared. Evan Smith, owner of the hardware store that competed directly with Walter's business, appeared at the door with an expression that mixed curiosity and disapproval. "Walter," he said without greetings, "we need to talk." Evan was a burly 50-year-old man with a greying moustache and a tendency to meddle in other people's lives. His store was on Main Street, 2 blocks up from Walter's stores, and for years he'd been trying to win over his competitors' clientele. "About what?" Walter asked, blocking the entrance. "About the street kid who's living here. Evan tried to peer over Walter's shoulder. "People are talking, Walter. They're questioning your intentions. My intentions are nobody's business. They are when they involve an abandoned child." Evan crossed his arms. "You know how this looks, especially after yesterday at the church." Walter's stomach dropped. "What do you know about yesterday?" "The whole town knows, Walter. Father Michael told some trusted people about your confession, and now you show up with a street kid." Evan shook his head. "It looks mighty convenient." "Convenient how?" "Like you're trying to clear your conscience by doing charity." Evan leaned forward. "But we know the truth, don't we? We know the kind of man you really are." At that moment, Izzy appeared behind Walter, holding his small hand. "Mr. Walter, who's this man?" Evan looked at the girl with a mixture of pity and suspicion. "Hello, little one. What's your name?" "Izzy. And are you Mr. Walter's friend?" "I'm his neighbor." Evan bent down to be at her height. "Do you know what kind of person Mr. Walter is?" The question, laden with malice, made Walter step forward, but Izzy answered before he could intervene. "Yes, I do. He's a good person who shares food and has a warm house." The girl looked at Evan seriously. "And you? What kind of person are you?" The innocent but direct answer made Evan visibly uncomfortable. He stood up, casting a warning glance at Walter. "This isn't over, Walter. People have a right to know who's taking care of their children." After Evan left, Walter closed the door with trembling hands. The storm he feared was just beginning, and now it wasn't just his life that was at stake. It was Izzy's too. The following days brought a strange but comforting routine for Walter and Izzy. The girl woke up early, helped prepare breakfast with the seriousness of an adult, and spent the mornings exploring the house or drawing on papers that Walter arranged for her. Her drawings always portrayed houses with smiling families, birds flying free, and huge suns that took up half the page, but the domestic tranquility contrasted drastically with what was happening outside. Walter felt the stares when he went out to buy food, heard the conversations that stopped abruptly when he approached, noticed how people crossed the street to avoid him. The confession at the church had spread throughout the town, and now his decision to shelter Izzy only fueled more speculation. It was on a Thursday afternoon that Mirtes returned with news about Izzy's tests. Walter received her in the living room, while the girl played in the backyard, building castles with pebbles she had collected. "The results are in," Mirtes said, taking an envelope from her bag. Her serious expression made Walter's stomach clench. "Is it serious?" "Izzy has a congenital heart defect, a ventricular septal defect that is getting worse." Mirtes opened the papers and showed incomprehensible images to Walter. "In simple terms, there's a hole in her heart that needs to be surgically corrected." Walter felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Surgery? What kind of surgery?" "Complex, expensive, and it needs to be done in New York City with a specific specialist." Mirtes folded the papers carefully. "Without the procedure, her heart will gradually fail. She already shows symptoms, the fatigue, the shortness of breath when she runs." "How much?" "How much does a surgery like that cost?" $200,000, not including the costs of hospitalization, preoperative exams, and post-operative follow-up. The number hit Walter like a punch. Even selling everything he owned, he wouldn't come close to that amount. His stores, which were already facing difficulties because of the informal boycott that Evan Smith had begun to orchestrate, barely generated enough profit to keep the bills paid. "How long does she have?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "About 6 months, maybe less, depending on how her heart responds to the strain." Mirtes leaned forward. "Mr. Sterling, I know this news is devastating, but I need to ask, are you prepared for this? To be responsible for a child who needs such specialized medical care?" Through the window, Walter saw Izzy in the backyard, humming a song that her mother had taught her as she arranged her pebbles in perfect rows. The girl who had appeared in his life as an angel of compassion now needed a miracle that he didn't know how to provide. "I'll get the money," he said, more to himself than to Mirtes. "How?" "I don't know, but I will." Mirtes studied his determined expression. "Mr. Sterling, can I ask a personal question?" "Sure. Why are you doing this?" "Really? This girl appeared in your life a week ago. You have no obligation to her." Walter was silent for a long moment, watching Izzy through the window. How to explain that the purity of that child had touched something in his soul that he thought was dead forever? How to say that taking care of her was the first thing that made sense in his life in decades? "Because she reminded me what it's like to be human," he said finally. "And because, for the first time in 30 years, I have a reason to get out of bed in the morning that isn't carrying guilt." That night, after Izzy fell asleep, Walter locked himself in his office and began to make desperate calculations. His 2 remaining stores were worth about $80,000 each if he could sell them quickly. The house was worth about $50,000. His cars, furniture, and savings could add up to another $20,000. Even liquidating everything he owned, he would be far short of the $200,000 needed. It was then that he remembered Braulio. His son worked as a lawyer in New York City, had a solid career and financial resources. Maybe, if he explained the situation. Walter picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed the number he knew by heart, but hadn't used in over 2 years. The call rang several times before being answered. "Hello?" Braulio's voice sounded distant and irritated. "Braulio, it's me, your father." The silence that followed was icy. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you. It's important." "About what? About how you destroyed our family? About how you shamed our name?" The bitterness in Braulio's voice was cutting. "I've heard about your confession at the church, Dad. The whole town is talking." "Braulio, please listen to me." "Listen to what? More lies? More excuses?" Braulio took a deep breath. "Do you know how many years I've lived carrying the weight of having a father I knew was hiding something terrible? How many nights I spent awake wondering what kind of secret could destroy a man the way it destroyed you? Son, now I know. And I also know that you're playing at doing charity with a street kid to try to buy forgiveness." Braulio's voice was filled with contempt. "Pathetic." "It's not about forgiveness," Walter exploded. "It's about a 4-year-old girl who needs heart surgery. Your problem, you chose to get involved in her life." There was a pause. "Don't call me again. We have nothing more to talk about." The line went dead. Walter held the phone until he heard the busy signal, feeling as if a part of him had been torn away. The only hope of getting financial help had just disappeared, along with any chance of reconciliation with his only son. The next morning, Izzy immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Are you sad, Mr. Walter?" she asked during breakfast. "I'm just worried about some grown-up things," he replied, trying to smile. "Is it because of the tests I had?" The direct question caught him off guard. "Did Miss Mirtes tell you that I'm sick?" Walter looked at that extraordinary girl, who at 4 years old had already learned to read the expressions of adults and interpret their fears. How to lie to someone who had shown so much maturity. "You have a little problem in your heart," he said carefully, "but the doctors know how to fix it. Will it hurt? Maybe a little, but after that you'll be completely fine." Izzy nodded with the serenity of someone who had already faced enough pain for a lifetime. "Mama always said that the things that hurt sometimes are the ones that do the most good later." That afternoon, while Izzy napped on the sofa, Walter made a decision that would change everything. He took paper and pen and began to write a letter to Gil, his younger brother who had disappeared from town shortly after the accident. He had no idea where he was or if he was still alive, but he had to try. He was in the middle of the letter when urgent knocks on the door interrupted him. Outside, he found Evan Smith accompanied by 3 other local merchants, all with somber expressions. "Walter," said Evan without preamble, "we've come to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "We want to buy your stores, both of them." Evan crossed his arms. "For $50,000 each." The value was ridiculously low, less than half of what they were worth. "They're not for sale." "They are now," said John Perry, owner of the lumberyard. "After everything that's happened, you don't have any more customers. Your businesses are finished in this town. It's better to accept our offer while you still can, added Tony Matthews, another merchant. Because if you don't accept, we'll make sure you don't sell so much as a screw. The threat was clear. They were organizing a complete boycott of his businesses, forcing him to sell for next to nothing. Walter felt the anger rise in his throat, but was interrupted by a small voice behind him. "Mr. Walter, who are these men?" Izzy had woken up and was at the door, watching the scene with big, worried eyes. The presence of the girl completely changed the dynamic of the confrontation. "They're just some neighbors," Walter said, placing himself protectively between her and the men. Evan looked at Izzy with an expression that mixed pity and disapproval. "Little one, you know a child's place is at school, not living with strangers?" "Mr. Walter isn't a stranger," Izzy replied firmly. "He takes care of me." "Are you sure about that?" Evan insisted. "Because real good people take lost children to the right places. They don't keep them at home." The venomous insinuation made Walter step forward, but Izzy spoke before he could explode. "Do you have children too, sir?" she asked Evan. "I do." "Two? And where are they now?" "At school." "Then why aren't you working to take care of them instead of being here bothering someone who is taking care of me?" The innocent but spot-on response left Evan speechless. The other men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Let's go," muttered John. "We've said what we came to say." After they left, Walter knelt in front of Izzy. "Are you okay?" "I am. But why were those men mad at you?" "Because sometimes people get angry about things they don't understand." Izzy hugged him tightly. "I understand you, Mr. Walter, and I like you a lot." At that moment, while holding that brave girl who defended him even when his own life was in danger, Walter knew he would do anything to save her, even if it meant completely destroying what little was left of his life. The following week brought a visible deterioration in Izzy's condition. The girl who used to run around the backyard now got tired climbing the stairs, and Walter noticed that she often put her hand to her chest, as if something hurt inside. Mirtes came to visit them daily, always with the pretext of checking on the girl's health, but Walter realized that she was also quickly becoming fond of the child. "She needs to start taking heart medication," said Mirtes one afternoon, handing over a prescription. "And no intense physical activities." "For how long?" Walter asked, watching Izzy draw sitting at the kitchen table. "Until the surgery." Mirtes lowered her voice. "Have you gotten anywhere with the money?" Walter shook his head negatively. He had spent days trying to negotiate loans at banks, but his deteriorated financial situation and ruined reputation meant that all doors were closing. Evan's threats were materializing. Old customers cancelled orders, suppliers demanded cash on delivery, and his stores practically didn't sell anything anymore. "What about your son? He doesn't want to talk to me." The words came out bitter. "I guess I can't blame him." It was at this moment that Walter's life took an even more dramatic turn. He was going up to the attic looking for old financial documents when he stumbled upon a wooden box hidden behind old furniture. The box was locked, but the lock had rusted over time. Inside, he found yellowed papers that he hadn't seen in decades. Letters, documents, old photographs of his family. But it was a sealed envelope with his name on it that caught his attention. The handwriting was his father's, who had died 15 years ago. "To Walter, to be opened only after I have departed this world." With trembling hands, he tore the seal and unfolded several handwritten sheets. What he read in the first lines made him sit heavily on the dusty attic floor. "My son, if you are reading this, it is because the time has finally come for you to know the truth about that terrible night of 1993. I carried this secret for 30 years, protecting our family in the way I thought best, but now I realize that I may have made the biggest mistake of my life." Walter continued reading, and with each word he felt the world collapsing around him in a completely new way. "You weren't driving the truck that night. Your brother Gil was. He had drunk too much at the 4th of July party and insisted on driving, even though I had forbidden it. When you two got home, he was in total panic. He said he had run over an entire family on the dirt road near the Olson farm. Walter's hands were shaking so much that he could barely hold the paper. Gil was crying like a child, saying that his life was over, that he would go to jail. It was then that you, my son, made the noblest and stupidest decision I have ever seen anyone make. You said you would take responsibility for the accident to protect your younger brother. I tried to stop you, but you had already made the decision. Walter vaguely remembered that night, but always as a confused haze. He had drunk too, although less than Gil. He remembered his brother crying, a heated argument, making a decision that would change his life forever. But he didn't clearly remember who was driving. What I did wrong was let you go along with this lie. I thought that over time you would forget, that it would be better for everyone. Gil fled town 2 days later, and you began to carry a guilt that wasn't yours. I saw you wither during all these years. I saw how it destroyed your marriage, how it drove Braulio away from you, and I didn't have the courage to tell the truth. Tears streamed down Walter's face as he continued reading. I know where Gil is. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona, has a successful trucking company, is married and has 2 children. During all these years, I tried to convince him to come back and tell the truth, but he always said it was too late, that it would destroy the life he built. He sends money every month to an account I opened in your name, but you never knew. The money is there, son. Almost $200,000 that he sent as a way to try to pay for the guilt. Walter stopped reading, his heart beating erratically. $200,000. Exactly the amount he needed for Izzy's surgery. His brother, unknowingly, had been paying for the guilt that wasn't Walter's all these years, and now that money could save the girl's life. The letter continued, with instructions on how to access the account, and ended with a request for forgiveness from his father for having allowed the lie to persist for so long. There was also Gil's current address in Phoenix, Arizona. When Walter came down from the attic, Izzy was waiting for him at the foot of the stairs with a worried expression. Are you crying, Mr. Walter? He knelt down and hugged her tightly. I am, but they're good tears. There are good tears? There are. They're the ones we cry when we discover that things can get better. That night, after Izzy fell asleep, Walter called the bank using the information from the letter. The account really existed, and the balance was exactly what his father had mentioned. Enough money to pay for Izzy's surgery and still have some left over for post-operative care. But along with the relief came a deep anger. 30 years of his life had been wasted carrying a guilt that wasn't his. 30 years of isolation, of depression, of watching his marriage crumble and his son drift away, all because of a lie that had grown so big that no one had the courage to undo it. Walter looked at Gil's address written at the end of the letter. His brother was in Phoenix, Arizona, living a prosperous life while he withered in guilt. The anger he felt was intense, but mixed with something more complex, the realization that Gil had also been a prisoner of that lie, just on the other side. The next morning, Mirtes arrived for her daily visit and found Walter with a completely different expression. Did something happen? She asked. I got the money for the surgery. Mirtes' eyes widened. How? Walter told her about the discovery in the attic, about his father's letter, and about the bank account that had existed for years without his knowledge. Mirtes listened to everything in silence, her expression gradually changing from surprise to indignation. You mean you spent 30 years carrying a guilt that wasn't yours? Apparently. And your brother knew this the whole time. He knew. Mirtes stood up and began to walk around the room. This is unbelievable. How can someone let this happen? The same question I'm asking myself. And what are you going to do now? Walter looked out the window, where Izzy was playing quietly in the backyard, arranging her pebbles in patterns that only she understood. First, I'm going to take care of her surgery. Then Then I'm going to have a very serious conversation with my brother. Are you going to look for him? I am. The determination in Walter's voice was steely. He owes me an explanation. He owes me 30 years of my life. That afternoon, while Izzy napped, Walter made calls to New York City, scheduling appointments with the specialist cardiologist and scheduling the surgery for the following week. Each practical step brought him closer to saving the girl's life, but also closer to the confrontation that he knew was inevitable. When Izzy woke up, he sat next to her on the sofa. I have good news for you. What? We're going to New York City next week. The doctors are going to fix your heart. Izzy's face lit up but quickly clouded over. Are you going with me? I am. And Myrte's too. And then we're coming back here. The simple question touched a wound that Walter hadn't fully thought about yet. After the surgery, after the confrontation with Gil, after everything, what would happen to them both? The life they had built together was based on temporary circumstances, but looking at that girl who had changed everything in his life, he knew that he couldn't simply let her go. We are, he promised. We're going home. But even as he made the promise, Walter knew that the confrontation that was to come would change everything again. And this time he had no idea what the consequences would be. The trip to New York City was scheduled for a Monday, but on the previous Friday, something unexpected happened that changed all of Walter's plans. He was organizing Izzy's clothes when he received a call from an unknown number. Hello, he answered cautiously. Walter, it's me, Gil. The world stopped. After 30 years, his younger brother's voice sounded on the phone, filled with nervousness and something that sounded like guilt. Walter sat heavily on the bed, his heart pounding. How did you get my number? I've been monitoring your life from afar all these years. I heard about the girl, about the surgery she needs. Gil's voice trembled. And I heard you discovered the bank account. Then you know that I know the truth. I do. There was a long pause. Walter, I need to see you. I need to explain. Explain what? How you let me carry your guilt for 30 years? It wasn't like that, or rather it was, but... Gil sighed deeply. Can I come over? I'm in my car, 2 hours away. I was coming to Willow Creek when I decided to call. The revelation that Gil was nearby left Walter even more shaken. Why? Why now? Because I heard about the girl. Because I saw that you finally found something worth fighting for. His brother's voice broke. And because I can't stand living with this lie anymore. Walter looked at Izzy, who was playing in the next room, oblivious to the drama that was unfolding. All right. Come. 2 hours later, a black car pulled up in front of Walter's house. From the driver's seat emerged a 59-year-old man, well-dressed, with graying hair and a posture that demonstrated financial success. But when Gil approached the door, Walter saw in his brother's eyes the same torment that he himself had carried for decades. You look different, said Gil, when they greeted each other at the gate. 30 years does that to a person. They entered the house in awkward silence. Gil looked around with curiosity and melancholy. Almost nothing has changed here. A lot has changed. You just weren't here to see it. At that moment, Izzy appeared in the living room, stopping shyly when she saw the stranger. Mr. Walter, who's this man? This is my brother, Gil. Gil, this is Izzy. Gil knelt down to be at the girl's height, and Walter saw tears forming in his brother's eyes. Hello, Izzy. You're even more beautiful than I imagined. Do you know me? She asked, curious. I do. Your Mr. Walter has told me a lot about you. Gil looked at Walter with an expression of gratitude and remorse. He told me you're a very brave girl. I am. I'm going to have heart surgery to get really strong. Izzy smiled. Mr. Walter said everything will be all right. It will, Gil assured, his voice choked. After Izzy went back to her toys, the two brothers sat down in the living room. The silence stretched for long minutes until Gil finally spoke. Not a day goes by that I don't think about that night. I imagine it doesn't. Walter, I was young, stupid, irresponsible. When the accident happened, I completely panicked. I couldn't think straight. Gil covered his face with his hands. When you said you would take the blame, I should have stopped you. I should have been man enough to face the consequences. But you weren't. I wasn't, and after I fled town, each day that passed made it harder to go back. I built a life, I got married, I had children. How to explain to my family that everything was built on a lie? Walter felt the anger rise in his throat. And me? What did you think happened to me all these years? I knew I was destroying your life. That's why I started sending money. I thought that... Gil shook his head. There's no excuse. I was a coward. That money didn't buy me one day of peace, not one day without guilt. I know. Gil stood up and walked to the window. I've lost everything, Walter. My wife, my children, my company. Last week I told them the truth. The revelation surprised Walter. You told them? Everything. About the accident. About you taking the blame. About the 30 years of lies. Gil turned to face him. My wife kicked me out of the house. My children don't want to talk to me anymore. I lost everything I built. And now you want what? Compassion? No. I want to repay at least part of what I destroyed in your life. Gil took an envelope out of his pocket. This is the deed to my trucking company. It's worth more than $1 million. It's yours. Walter looked at the envelope without touching it. I don't want your company. Then sell it and use the money to take care of Izzy. To give her everything she deserves. Gil placed the envelope on the table. And there's one more thing. I'm turning myself into the authorities. I'm going to publicly tell what happened that night. After 30 years? Better late than never. Gil sat down again. Walter, I know I can never make up for what I did to you, but I can try to clear your name. At that moment, Izzy appeared in the living room again, this time carrying one of her drawings. Can I show it to Mr. Gil? Of course, said Walter, watching the interaction. Izzy handed the paper to Gil. It was a drawing of a house with 2 adult figures and a small child, all smiling. This is our family, she explained. Me, Mr. Walter, and Aunt Mirtis. Gil studied the drawing carefully. It's very pretty. You look very happy. We are. Mr. Walter takes very good care of me. Izzy looked at Walter with adoration. He's the best person in the world. The girl's words struck Gil like a dagger. He handed back the drawing with trembling hands and stood up. I need to go. The trip to New York City is tomorrow? It is. Can I come with you? I want to make sure everything goes well with the surgery. Walter hesitated. Gil's presence would further complicate an already delicate situation, but looking at Izzy, who was watching the 2 men with curiosity, he realized that maybe it was time to start healing wounds instead of deepening them. You can come. The next day, an unusual convoy left Willow Creek towards New York City. Mirtes drove her car with Walter and Izzy, while Gil followed them in his vehicle. The girl was excited about the trip, asking questions about everything she saw out the window. Aunt Mirtes, why is New York City so far away? She asked. Because the important things are sometimes far away to test how much we want to reach them, Mirtes replied, looking in the rearview mirror at Walter. During the trip, Mirtes told Walter something she had discovered about her own life. I had a daughter, she said softly, so that Izzy wouldn't hear. I lost her at 5 years old. Leukemia. I'm so sorry. It was 10 years ago. That's why I understand what you're feeling now. The desperation of wanting to save a child who has become everything to you. Walter looked at Izzy, who was sleeping peacefully in the back seat. How did you get over it? I didn't. I learned to live with the pain. Mirtes paused. But taking care of Izzy has helped me heal wounds that I thought would never heal. She has that power, Walter agreed, to heal broken people. When they arrived at the hospital in New York City, Gil was waiting for them in the lobby. There was something different in his posture, a determination that Walter hadn't seen in decades. The doctors want to talk to the legal guardian, said the receptionist. That's me, Walter replied, but Gil interrupted him. Actually, it's both of us. We're family. While they filled out the paperwork for Izzy's admission, Gil did something that surprised Walter. He took out a cell phone and called someone. "Who are you calling?" "A journalist from Albany. It's time to tell the truth." Walter felt his stomach clench. "Gil, are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. You carried my guilt for 30 years. It's time for me to carry mine." At that moment, in the hospital lobby in New York City, with Izzy about to face the most important surgery of her life, the two brothers finally began the healing process that should have started 3 decades ago. The night before the surgery was one of the longest in Walter's life. Izzy slept in the hospital room, connected to monitors that recorded every beat of her fragile heart, while he, Mirtes and Gil took turns keeping vigil in the hallway. The tension between the brothers had gradually decreased during the last few hours, replaced by a common concern for the girl who had changed their lives. "Is she scared?" asked Gil, watching Izzy through the room window. "She doesn't show it, but I think so," Walter replied. "She's too brave for her own age." "Like her mother was," added Mirtes. "Joaquina was always like that too." The two men turned to her, surprised. "You knew Izzy's mother?" "We worked together at the hospital in Willow Creek for 2 years. Joaquina was one of the most dedicated nurses I've ever known." Mirtes sat down in one of the plastic chairs in the hallway. "When she got sick, I took care of her during the last months. I promised her that I would take care of Izzy if anything happened." "Why have you never told me this?" asked Walter. "Because you were already carrying too much guilt. You didn't need to know that I also had a personal reason to help." Mirtes looked at Izzy. "Joaquina made me promise that I would find a good family for Izzy. When I saw you together, I knew she had found where she belonged." The next morning, Dr. Howard Carter, the pediatric cardiologist who would perform the surgery, met with them to explain the procedure. He was a tall and serene man with firm hands and eyes that conveyed confidence. "Izzy's surgery is complex, but we have a success rate of 95%, he explained. "We will correct the defect in the ventricular septum and replace a valve that is not working properly. The procedure should last between 4 and 6 hours. "And then?" asked Walter. "1 week recovery in the hospital, then another month of rest at home. If everything goes well, she will have a completely normal life." When it came time to take Izzy to the operating room, she surprised everyone with her tranquility. Dressed in the hospital gown, she hugged each of them calmly. "Mr. Walter, are you going to be here when I wake up?" "I'm going to be here, I promise." "And Mr. Gil, too?" Gil knelt down next to the gurney. "I'm going to be here too, little one. And Aunt Mirtes? We're all going to be here waiting for you," Mirtes assured, kissing the girl's forehead. Izzy smiled. "Then I don't have to be afraid. When you have a family, you're never alone." The doors of the operating room closed, and began the most agonizing wait that any of them had ever faced. During the first few hours they barely spoke, each lost in their own concerns and silent prayers. It was during the 3rd hour that Gil's phone rang. It was the journalist from Albany. "Mr. Gil, the article about your confession will be in tomorrow's edition of the newspaper. Are you sure you want to keep all the details?" "I'm sure. Publish everything." After he hung up, Gil turned to Walter. "Tomorrow, the whole town will know the truth. How do you feel?" "Terrified, but relieved too." Gil paused. "And you?" Walter thought about the question. For 30 years, he had imagined what it would be like to be free of the guilt he carried. Now that it was about to happen, he discovered that his feelings were more complex than he had imagined. "I don't know yet. It's strange to think that I can wake up tomorrow without carrying that weight." "Walter," said Gil hesitantly, "what's going to happen to us after all this, after Izzy recovers?" "I don't know that either. I wish we could try to be brothers again." Before Walter could answer, Dr. Carter appeared in the hallway, still wearing the surgical scrubs. His face was serious, and everyone's heart raced. "The surgery was a success," he said. and the three adults release the air they didn't even know they were holding. Izzy is in recovery, still under anesthesia, but all vital signs are excellent. "Can we see her?" asked Mertes. "In an hour, when she is more awake." That hour seemed like an eternity. When they were finally able to enter the pediatric ICU, they found Izzy awake but sleepy, connected to various devices but with a weak smile on her face. "Mr. Walter?" Her voice came out hoarse. "I'm here, my dear. It hurt, but not too much. And the doctors said that my heart is fixed." "It is. Now you'll be able to run and play as much as you want." Izzy looked around and saw Gil and Mirtes there too. "Did you stay here the whole time?" "The whole time," confirmed Gil. "That's good. I knew that when I woke up my family would be here." At that moment, seeing Izzy smile despite everything she had been through, Walter knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The girl had created a family where before there had only been broken and isolated people. During the following days, while Izzy recovered in the hospital, Walter and Gil spent hours talking, trying to rebuild a relationship that had been destroyed by decades of lies and guilt. Mirtes alternated between taking care of the girl and mediating conversations between the brothers, bringing the wisdom of someone who understood deeply about loss and recovery. It was on the fourth day that they received an unexpected call from Willow Creek. It was Braulio, Walter's son. "Dad, I saw the article in the newspaper." His son's voice sounded different, less hostile, more confused. "Braulio, is it true? You weren't responsible for the accident?" "It's true." Why did you let me believe that all these years?" "Because I didn't know how to tell the truth without destroying our family even more." There was a long pause. "Dad, can I come to New York City? I want to see you. And I want to meet the girl." For the first time in years, Walter felt tears of joy streaming down his face. "You can come, son. You can come." When Braulio arrived the next day, he found a scene he had never imagined. His father smiling genuinely for the first time he could remember. His uncle Gil, whom he hadn't seen in decades. A nurse who clearly cared deeply about all of them. And a 4-year-old girl who had managed to bring together a fragmented family. "So you're Braulio," said Izzy when she was introduced to him. "Mr. Walter talks about you all the time." "He does. He does. He said that you're very smart and that he misses you a lot." Braulio looked at his father with an expression mixed with surprise and emotion. "Dad, You don't have to say anything now," Walter interrupted. "We have plenty of time to talk." That night, in the hospital in New York City, 5 people who had been lost in their own pain finally began to heal together. Izzy slept peacefully, her heart finally working as it should, unaware that she had performed a miracle much greater than her own recovery. She had healed an entire family. But there was still one more surprise waiting for them. The next morning, when Dr. Carter came to discharge Izzy, he brought news that would change everything once again. "There's something you need to know about Izzy," he said with a strange expression. "During the surgery, we discovered something in the blood tests that we weren't expecting." The silence in the hospital room became dense after Dr. Carter's words. Walter felt his stomach clench, fearing that there was some medical complication that they didn't yet know about. "What kind of discovery?" asked Mirtes, her professional voice masking the worry. "During the preoperative exams, we did a complete blood typing of Izzy. It's standard procedure for heart surgeries." Dr. Carter consulted his notes. "What we found was unusual." "Doctor, please be direct," asked Walter, holding Izzy's hand, who was watching everything with childish curiosity. "Izzy has an extremely rare blood type, Renull. It's found in less than 50 people worldwide." The doctor paused. "But the most interesting thing is that, checking our database, we discovered that there is only one other person registered in the southeast region with exactly the same blood type." Gil leaned forward. "Who?" "A man named Jim Sanders, 42 years old, residing in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He's been registered as a donor since he was 20 years old. The name hit everyone like lightning. Mirtes covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide. Jim Sanders was the name of Izzy's father. But he disappeared before she was born, Walter said, confused. Joaquina said he had left. Apparently, he didn't go very far, murmured Gil. Dr. Carter consulted his papers again. Mr. Sanders keeps his data updated in the donor bank. He works as a mechanic in Scranton, is married, and has a teenage son. Izzy, who had followed the conversation without fully understanding, asked the question that everyone was thinking. Could that man be my daddy? The innocence of the question contrasted with the complexity of the situation. If Jim really was Izzy's father, it would change everything. The girl wasn't completely orphaned as everyone believed. "Doctor," said Mirtes carefully, "would it be possible to contact this man? I can provide the contact information we have on file, but any approach would have to be made by you. The hospital cannot mediate family matters." That afternoon, after Izzy was discharged and they settled into a hotel near the hospital for a few days of recovery, an intense discussion took place in the next room while the girl slept. "We need to contact him," said Mirtes. "Izzy has the right to know her father, but what if he doesn't want to know her?" argued Walter. "What if he really abandoned Joaquina when he found out she was pregnant?" "What if it wasn't like that?" countered Braulio. "What if he never knew he had a daughter?" Gil, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "There's only one way to find out. Someone needs to call him." "I'll do it," offered Mirtes. "As a nurse, I can approach the situation professionally." Walter looked through the half-open door at Izzy, who was sleeping peacefully. The girl had just undergone complex surgery, was recovering well, and now they discovered that she might have a living father. It was too much to process. "If we're going to do this, it needs to be done the right way," he said. "Izzy can't be hurt again." The next morning, Mirtes made the call. Jim Sanders answered on the third ring, his voice revealing a northeastern accent. "Hello, Mr. Sanders. My name is Mirtes Silva. I'm a nurse. I'm calling about a delicate matter related to a person from your past." "What kind of matter?" "Did you know a woman named Joaquina Santos about 5 years ago? In Willow Creek?" The silence on the other end of the line was revealing. When Jim finally answered, his voice was choked. "Joaquina, how is she?" "Mr. Sanders, I regret to inform you that Joaquina passed away more than a year ago." "My God!" The pain in his voice was genuine. "How? What happened?" "Illness. But Mr. Sanders, there's something more. Joaquina had a daughter, a girl named Izzy, who is now 4 years old." The silence this time stretched for so long that Mirtes thought the call had dropped. When Jim spoke again, his voice was broken. "A daughter? I have a daughter?" "Apparently so. She's with me now, recovering from heart surgery." "Surgery? Is she okay?" "She is. The surgery was successful." Mirtes paused. "Mr. Sanders, why did you leave Willow Creek? Joaquina said you left when you found out about the pregnancy." "I never knew about any pregnancy." The response was immediate and full of emotion. "I left town because my father got sick and I needed to go back to Scranton to take care of him. I tried to stay in touch with Joaquina, but she never answered my letters. I thought she had given up on me." The revelation left Mirtes speechless. Once again, a misunderstanding had separated a family. "Mr. Sanders, would you like to meet your daughter?" "More than anything in the world. Where are you?" "In New York City, at the Heart Hospital. But there's something else you need to know. Izzy is being cared for by a man named Walter Sterling. They've formed a very strong bond." "I understand. I just want to meet my daughter, see if she's okay." When Mirtes returned to the room with the news of the conversation, she found everyone anxiously awaiting the results. "He wants to meet Izzy," she announced, "and he never knew she existed." Walter felt a mixture of relief and panic. Relief because Izzy hadn't been abandoned by her father. Panic because it meant that another adult now had rights over the girl he had learned to love as a daughter. "When is he coming?" he asked. "Tomorrow. He's hitting the road now." Izzy, who had woken up during the conversation, approached the bed where the adults were gathered. "Are you talking about my daddy?" "We are, honey," Walter said, picking her up. "How do you feel about meeting him?" "Happy, but also scared." "Scared of what? What if he doesn't like me? What if he wants to take me away from you?" The innocent question touched on Walter's greatest fear. He had found purpose caring for Izzy, had discovered what it was to love unconditionally, and now he risked losing her to her biological father. "Izzy," he said carefully, "no matter what happens, there will always be people who love you and want to take care of you. But I want to stay with you, Mr. Sterling, and I want you to stay with me too." That night, while Izzy slept between them in the hotel bed, Walter and Myrtis talked about the uncertain future that awaited them. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified? What if Jim wants to take her away? Then we'll fight for her, legally if necessary." Myrtis took his hand. "But maybe he'll understand that Izzy needs stability, not another drastic change. And if he doesn't, then we'll show him how much she means to us, how much we mean to her." The next morning, while they waited for Jim's arrival, Izzy made a special drawing. It was a large house with many people around it: Walter, Myrtes, Gil, Braulio, and now a new figure she was coloring carefully. "Who's that?" Walter asked. "My daddy. I hope he likes living in our big house." Izzy's innocence, her ability to simply include one more person in her already expanded family, deeply touched everyone present. She didn't see her father's arrival as a threat, but as an addition to the family she had built. Jim Sanders arrived at the hotel at 2 in the afternoon, driving an old but well-maintained pickup truck. Through the lobby windows, Walter observed him before he entered. A man of medium height, dark hair with grey streaks at the temples, simple but clean clothes, and an expression of nervousness mixed with expectation. "That's him," Walter murmured to Myrtis. Izzy was in the room playing with Braulio and Gil, oblivious to the moment that would change her life once again. Walter and Myrtes went down to greet Jim in the lobby, both tense with the importance of that meeting. "Mr. Sanders?" Myrtes approached. "Yes, that's me." He shook her hand nervously. "Thank you for calling me. I'm still trying to process all this." Walter introduced himself, studying the man who was Izzy's biological father. There was something about Jim that immediately reassured him. The same kindness in his eyes that he saw in the girl, the same humble demeanor she displayed. "How is she?" was Jim's first question. "The surgery? Was it serious?" "It was complex but successful," Myrtes explained. "She's recovering very well. She's a strong girl." "Like her mother," Jim said, his eyes filling with tears. "Joaquina was always the strongest person I knew." They sat down in armchairs in the lobby to talk before going up. Walter realized he needed to understand Jim's intentions before introducing him to Izzy. "Mr. Sanders," he began carefully, "I'd like to better understand what happened between you and Joaquina." Jim sighed deeply. "We met when I was working at a garage in Willow Creek. She was a nurse at the local hospital. We dated for 8 months. I was in love with her, had plans to marry. And why did you leave town? My father had a stroke in Scranton. He was a widower. I was an only child. There was no one to take care of him." Jim ran his hands over his face. "I promised Joaquina I would come back as soon as he recovered. I wrote letters, tried to call, but she never answered." "She never mentioned the letters," Myrtes said. "After 6 months without a response, I thought she had moved on. I met my current wife in Scranton, got married, had a son, but I never forgot Joaquina." Jim looked at them. "If I had known about the pregnancy, I would have come back immediately." Walter felt a pang in his chest. Another family destroyed by misunderstandings and lack of communication. "And your current family? Do they know about Izzy?" "I told my wife everything last night. It was difficult, but she understood." Jim paused. "My son Rodrigo is 15. He was excited about the idea of having a sister." "And what do you hope for now?" Walter asked, getting to the point that worried him most. I want to meet my daughter. I want to be a part of her life." Jim looked directly at him. "But from our conversation on the phone, I understand that she has built bonds here. I don't want to destroy what has been built." The answer partially relieved Walter's worries. "Izzy is a special girl. She changed my life completely, I imagine. And I'm grateful for that. For you taking care of her when I didn't even know she existed." Myrtis stood up. "How about we go up? Izzy is eager to meet you." In the elevator, Jim asked details about Izzy's personality, her likes, her fears. Walter answered with the love of a proud father, describing how brave, caring, intelligent she was for her age. "She draws a lot," he said, "always houses with large, happy families. Like her mother." Joaquina also loved to draw. When they arrived at the room, they found Izzy sitting on the bed, carefully coloring a new drawing. She looked up when the door opened and saw an unknown man behind Walter and Myrtis. "Izzy," Walter said gently, "this is Jim. Remember we talked about him yesterday?" The girl nodded, studying the man with curiosity. Jim approached slowly, kneeling beside the bed to be at her level. "Hi, Izzy. I'm your daddy. You look like the pictures Mama had," she said simply. "Your mama had pictures of me?" "She did. She said you were a good man, but you had left to take care of someone who was sick." Jim closed his eyes, emotional. "She told you about me." "She did. She said that one day you would come back." Izzy tilted her head. "Why did it take so long?" The innocent question hit Jim hard. "Because I didn't know you existed, Princess. If I had known, I would have come much sooner. But now you've come." "I have, and I really want to get to know you better." Izzy showed her drawing. "Look, I drew our family. You're here too." Jim looked at the paper and saw a large house with many figures. "Who are all these people?" "That's me, that's Mr. Sterling who takes care of me. That's Aunt Myrtis, who's a nurse. That's Uncle Gil, who's Mr. Sterling's brother. That's Braulio, who's Mr. Sterling's son. And that's you." "We're a lot," Jim commented, smiling. "It's good to have a big family. That way, you're never alone." During the following hours, Jim spent time getting to know Izzy, while the other adults watched discreetly. The connection between father and daughter was evident, but so was the special bond she maintained with Walter. "Daddy Jim," she said at one point, "are you going to live with us?" "I live in another city, Princess. But I can come visit you often. Or you can move here. Mr. Sterling said our house will be big." Jim looked at Walter, confused. "What house?" "We're planning to move to a bigger house when we get back to Willow Creek," Walter explained. "With everything that's happened, we thought it best to start in a new place. Can I be a part of these plans?" The question caught everyone off guard. Walter felt a mixture of panic and hope. "What do you mean?" "I don't want to take Izzy away from you. You are her family now." Jim took a deep breath. "But I also don't want to be left out of my daughter's life. Maybe we could find a way to be a family altogether." Myrtis spoke up. "Would you move from Scranton?" "For my daughter, I would move anywhere." Jim looked at Izzy, who was watching them with interest. "My job is a mechanic. I can work in any city. And my wife. She understands the situation. And your son. Rodrigo, too. In fact, he was excited about the idea of having a little sister." Izzy clapped her hands. "Am I going to have a big brother, too?" "You will, if you want." "I want to. I always wanted a brother." That night, after Izzy fell asleep, all the adults gathered in the hotel lobby for a serious conversation about the future. Jim had shown himself genuinely interested in being a part of Izzy's life without destroying the bonds she had created. "It's a complex situation," Braulio admitted, "but maybe it's exactly what everyone needs." "What do you mean?" Gil asked. "Izzy needs stability and love. She has that with you." Braulio looked at Walter and Myrtis. "But she also deserves to know her origins, to have a biological family. And you," he addressed his father, "you deserve to have a family too." Jim nodded. I'm willing to do anything to make this work. Izzy comes first. Then let's try, Walter said, surprising even himself. Let's go back to Willow Creek and see if we can build something that works for everyone. Murty smiled. Izzy will be happy. She always said she wanted a big family. And now she has one, Jim said. A very big and very special family. But even with all the agreements and goodwill, no one imagined that the biggest challenge was yet to come when they returned to Willow Creek. The return to Willow Creek happened on a Thursday in September, but the group that arrived in town was very different from the one that had left 2 weeks before. Now there were 3 cars, Mirtes driving with Izzy and Walter, Jim following them with his family, his wife Carmela and son Rodrigo had decided to accompany him on the move, and Braulio and Gil in the 3rd vehicle. The news of Gilberto's confession had spread throughout the region during their absence. The Albany newspaper had published a detailed story about the 30 years of lies that were finally coming to an end, and it had caused a real earthquake in the local community. "Look at how many people are in Harmony Park," Izzy observed, pointing out the car window. Indeed, a small group of residents had gathered in Harmony Park, and when they saw the cars passing, some pointed and whispered to each other. The tension was palpable, even through the vehicle's windows. "They're curious," Walter said diplomatically, but inside his stomach was churning. He didn't know how the town would react to his return, now that the truth had been revealed. They headed first to Walter's house, where they planned to meet before deciding on the next steps. But when they arrived on the street, they found an unpleasant surprise. Evan Smith was standing in front of the gate, accompanied by 3 other local merchants. "Nothing's changed," Gil muttered from the car behind. Walter got out of the vehicle first, preparing for the confrontation he knew was inevitable. Izzy tried to follow him, but Mirtes kept her in the car. "Walter," Evan said without preamble, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About this whole charade. Do you think a newspaper article is going to change what everyone knows about you?" At that moment, Gil got out of his car and approached. "Evan, long time no see." Gil Sterling, the runaway brother who decided to come back and take the blame. Evan stared at him with disdain. "Very convenient, don't you think?" "Convenient would have been to continue lying," Gil replied firmly. "I came to fix a mistake I should have fixed 30 years ago. And we're going to believe that? 2 brothers who decide to change the story after decades." John Perry, one of the merchants, spoke up. "Sounds like a setup." It was at that moment that an unexpected voice joined the discussion. Father Michael had arrived, walking slowly along the sidewalk, his expression serious but not as hostile as the last time Walter had seen him. "Father," Evan greeted, clearly expecting support from the religious figure. "Evan, gentlemen." Father Michael looked at each of them before addressing Walter. "I read the article in the newspaper, and I've spent the last few days reflecting on our last conversation. Father, let me finish." The father raised his hand. "For 30 years, you carried a guilt that wasn't yours. For 30 years, you suffered in silence to protect your brother. For 30 years, I judged you without knowing the whole truth." Evan frowned. "Father, you can't be believing this story." "I'm believing it because I've known this man for 3 decades. I know the weight he carried, the way he withered in silence." Father Michael turned to Gil. "And you, young Gil, have finally found the courage to face the truth." "Father, they may be lying," Evan insisted. "They may be. But I prefer to err by believing in redemption than by being right in cynicism." The father looked at the house. "And where is the girl? I heard she had surgery." Izzy, who had been watching everything from the car window, couldn't contain herself any longer. She got out of the vehicle and ran to Walter, who picked her up protectively. "This is Izzy," he said. "Hello, my dear," Father Michael said gently. "How are you feeling?" "Much better." "The doctors fixed my heart." She looked at Evan and the other men. "Why are those men mad at Mr. Sterling?" The innocent question created an awkward silence. Evan looked at the girl, clearly uncomfortable, demonstrating hostility in front of a child. "We're not mad, little one," he said, softening his tone. "We're just talking. Oh, Izzy nodded. Mama always said that when adults talk like that, it's because they're hurt about something. At that moment, Jim approached the group carrying a suitcase. Excuse me, could you please step away from the gate? I need to get in. And who are you? Evan asked. Jim Sanders, Izzy's father. The revelation caused more surprise among the merchants. Father? I thought she was an orphan, said Tony Matthews. It's a long story, Jim replied. But the important thing is that I'm here now to take care of my daughter, along with the people who were already taking care of her. Evan looked from Walter to Jim, clearly confused by the situation. So, you're all going to live together? For now, yes, Walter said, until we find a bigger house. That's not going to work, one of the merchants muttered. Too many people together will cause problems. It was Izzy who responded, with the simple wisdom of a child. Why would it cause problems? Big families are more fun. There are more people to play with and more people to take care of when someone gets sick. Father Michael smiled. Wise answer, little one. And now, gentlemen, he addressed the merchants, I suggest you let this family settle in peace. They've been through a lot lately. This isn't over, Sterling, Evan said as he walked away. The whole town will be watching you. Let them watch, replied Brolio, who had joined the group. We have nothing to hide. After the merchants left, Father Michael lingered a little longer. Walter, I'd like to talk to you in private when you have a moment. Of course, Father. And Gil, he addressed the younger brother, you too. I think we all have a lot to talk about regarding forgiveness and new beginnings. When they finally entered the house, the tension of the confrontation gave way to a lighter atmosphere. Carmela, Jim's wife, proved to be a kind and understanding woman who quickly connected with Izzy. Rodrigo, the teenage son, was initially shy, but soon became enchanted with his little sister. Do you like to draw? He asked Izzy. I love to. Do you want to see my drawings? I do. While the children interacted, the adults gathered in the kitchen to discuss practical arrangements. The house has 3 bedrooms, Walter said. Izzy can stay in the room she already used. You can use the master bedroom, and I can use the couch. No, Jim said firmly. You're not sleeping on the couch in your own house. Rodrigo and I can share a room. Carmela stays with Izzy, and you keep your room. And me? Mirtes asked. You have your own house, Braulio reminded her, but you can come here whenever you want. Actually, Mirtes said hesitantly, I was thinking about selling my house and looking for something bigger. For all of us. The suggestion surprised everyone. You would do that? Walter asked. I would. Izzy has become like a daughter to me, and you've become my family. Mirtes smiled. Besides, a nurse is always useful in a house with so many people. It was Gil who made the suggestion that would change everything. What if we bought a rural property on the outskirts of town? A big place, with room for everyone, away from the gossip and the conflicts? That would cost a fortune, Jim said. Not necessarily. We can split the costs. Gil looked around. I have the resources from the company I transferred to Walter. You have your savings. Together we can get something really special. Izzy, who had overheard part of the conversation, appeared in the kitchen holding Rodrigo's hand. Are you talking about our new house? We are, Walter said. What do you think about living in a house in the country, with lots of space to play? With a big yard to plant flowers, with a huge yard to plant whatever you want, and with a place for everyone to sleep, with a place for everyone and still have room left over. Izzy smiled the radiant smile that had won them all over. Then let's go look for our new house. That night, as everyone settled into the cramped but welcoming house, no one imagined that the greatest test of this makeshift family's resilience was yet to come. 3 weeks had passed since the return to Willow Creek, and the routine of the house was beginning to establish itself. Izzy had adapted wonderfully to the presence of Jim and his family, calling Carmela Aunt Car and Rodrigo Bro Ro. The girl was blossoming with so much attention and love, her recovery from surgery being remarkable both physically and emotionally. It was one morning in October that everything changed again. Walter was in the kitchen making coffee when someone knocked insistently on the door. It was 8 in the morning, an unusual time for visitors, which immediately put him on alert. When he opened the door, he found an unknown woman, well-dressed, holding a folder of documents and accompanied by a social worker he vaguely recognized. "Mr. Walter Sterling?" the woman asked with a firm, professional voice. "Yes, that's me. I'm Dr. Patricia Mendonça, a lawyer specializing in family law. This is Sandra Oliveira from the Child Protective Services of the region. We've come to talk about the situation of the minor Izzy Santos." Walter's heart raced. "What situation?" "We received an anonymous complaint about irregularities in the child's custody. May we come in?" Reluctantly, Walter let them in. In the living room, they found Jim drinking coffee while Izzy played on the floor with some toys Rodrigo had brought from Scranton. "And you are?" Dr. Patricia asked Jim. "Jim Sanders, Izzy's biological father." "Ah, yes. We need to talk about that too." The lawyer sat down, uninvited. "Mr. Sanders, do you have any documents proving paternity?" "Not yet, but I can take a DNA test when necessary." "It will be necessary." Dr. Patricia opened her folder. "Because the current situation of this child is, to say the least, irregular." Izzy, sensing the tension in the room, approached Walter. "Mr. Sterling, who are these people?" "They are people who work with children, honey." Sandra Oliveira knelt in front of Izzy with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Izzy. How are you?" "Good," the girl replied timidly, hiding behind Walter. "Izzy," Dr. Patricia said, "do you like living here?" "I like it a lot. This is my family." "But do you know that a real family is made up of people who are related? Daddy, mama, brothers?" The question confused Izzy. "But I have Daddy Jim and Mr. Sterling and Aunt Myrtis and Aunt Carr and Bro Ro." "That's not a real family, dear. It's just a group of people taking care of you." Walter felt anger rise in his throat. "Excuse me, but what exactly is the problem here?" "The problem, Mr. Sterling, is that this child is living in a situation of informal custody without any legal protection." Dr. Patricia consulted her papers. "Furthermore, we have received concerning information about the suitability of this environment." "What kind of information?" "That the child is being cared for by multiple adults without formal kinship, including a man with a history of criminal confession." "But the confession was false," Jim protested. "That's already been clarified publicly." "Clarified by whom? By a brother who conveniently appeared after 30 years? Sandra Oliveira spoke up. "Sorry, but that doesn't sound very reliable to us." At that moment, Myrtes arrived for her morning visit and found the tension in the air. "What's happening?" "And you are?" Dr. Patricia asked. "Myrtes Silva, a nurse. I oversee Izzy's medical care." "Another adult with no formal kinship with the child," the lawyer made notes. "Mr. Sanders, even if the test proves your paternity, you are not in a position to exercise sole custody of this child." "Why not?" "Because you recently moved to the city, you don't have a stable job here, and you don't have a suitable residence for a family." "We're looking for a bigger house," Walter said. "That doesn't solve the legal issue." Dr. Patricia closed her folder. "I've come here to officially communicate that Child Protective Services is assuming temporary custody of Izzy while we assess whether any of you are fit to exercise permanent custody." The silence that followed was deafening. Izzy looked from one adult to another, realizing that something terrible was happening. "What does that mean?" she asked in a tiny voice. "It means, dear, that you're going to stay in a special place for a while we figure out where it's best for you to live," Sandra said with false gentleness. "But I want to stay here." "We know, but sometimes what we want isn't what's best for us." Walter stepped in front of Izzy. "You can't just take her like that." "Actually, we can. We have a court order." Dr. Patricia took a document out of the folder. "Izzy must be handed over to the temporary home today." "Temporary home?" Jim stood up abruptly. "Are you talking about an orphanage?" "We're talking about an institution specialized in the care of children in vulnerable situations." Izzy started to cry. "I don't want to go. I want to stay with my family." "Izzy, don't cry," Sandra tried to calm her. "It'll only be for a little while." "No!" the girl screamed, clinging to Walter's leg. "I'm not leaving here." At that moment, Braulio arrived for another of his daily visits and found the chaos in the living room. As a lawyer, he immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "May I see that court order?" he asked. Dr. Patricia hesitated. "And you are?" "Braulio Sterling, attorney, and Mr. Walter's son." "Ah, another party interested in the case." She handed over the document reluctantly. Braulio read it quickly and frowned. "This order is based on an anonymous complaint, among other evidence." "What other evidence? I don't see any here besides vague allegations." Braulio looked at Sandra. "Did you do a home assessment? Interview the caregivers? Verify the child's living conditions?" "We're doing that now." "After you already have a removal order?" Braulio shook his head. "This is extremely irregular." "Mr. Sterling, we're not going to debate legal procedures in front of the child," Dr. Patricia said. "The order must be enforced, not without a proper assessment." Braulio turned to Walter. "Dad, don't let anyone leave here with Izzy. I'll get a restraining order to suspend this order." "You're obstructing a legal procedure," Sandra threatened. "We're protecting a child from an irregular procedure," Braulio retorted. Izzy, in the midst of all the discussion, did something that no one expected. She stopped crying and addressed Dr. Patricia with the seriousness of an adult. "Ma'am, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, dear." "Do you have children?" "Yes, I do." "And if someone wanted to take your children away from you, how would you feel?" The simple but profound question left the lawyer speechless for a moment. That's different, Izzy." "Why? Because I wasn't born from their bellies?" Izzy pointed to Walter and Myrtes. "But they love me like I was born from them, and I love them too." "Izzy, you're too young to understand." "I do understand. I understand that you want to separate me from the people who take care of me, like Aunt Creusa used to do to me before." The mention of the previous situation made Sandra lean forward. "Who is Aunt Creusa?" "She was a bad person who hurt me, until Mr. Sterling saved me." Izzy looked at each adult in the room. "Now you want to take me to another place where I don't know anyone. How is that better?" Izzy's innocence and crystal-clear logic created an awkward silence. Dr. Patricia and Sandra exchanged glances, clearly not expecting to face such articulate resistance from a 4-year-old. It was at that moment that Father Michael appeared at the door. "Excuse me." The door was open. "I came to pay a pastoral visit." "Father!" Izzy exclaimed, running to him. "They want to take me away!" The father looked around, quickly assessing the situation. "And who are they?" Braulio made the introductions quickly, explaining the situation. Father Michael listened attentively before addressing the two women. "Dr. Patricia, Sandra, as a representative of the local church, I can attest that this child is being very well cared for by this family. I've been following the situation closely. Father, we understand your concern, but there are legal issues. There are human issues too, and sometimes they are more important than the legal ones." At that moment, with Izzy clinging to the priest, the whole family around her defending her, and 2 authorities trying to separate her from everything she knew as home, it became clear that the biggest battle for the girl's happiness was just beginning. The tension in the room was palpable as Father Michael positioned himself clearly on the side of the family. Dr. Patricia and Sandra Oliveira seemed visibly uncomfortable with the resistance they were facing, very different from what they expected when they arrived. "Look," said Dr. Patricia, trying to regain control of the situation. "I understand that everyone cares about the child, but there are legal protocols that must be followed." "And there are real children behind those protocols," Father Michael retorted firmly. "I've known Izzy for months. I saw the state she arrived in here, and I see how she is now. It would be criminal to destroy that stability." Sandra spoke up. "Father, you need to understand that our role is to protect vulnerable children. And I understand that your role is to protect children, not traumatize them," Myrtis interrupted. "As a nurse, I can attest that Izzy has never been healthier, physically and emotionally." It was at that moment that more unexpected reinforcements arrived. The doorbell rang, and Walter opened the door to find at least 10 neighbors on the sidewalk, all with worried expressions. "We heard you were trying to take little Izzy away," said Mrs. Conception, the neighbor who, ironically, had been one of the first to gossip about the situation. "We came to support you." "How did you know?" Walter asked, surprised. "Rodrigo ran out to tell everyone," another neighbor explained. The boy was desperate. In the living room, Izzy continued to cling to Father Michael, but now watched the flurry of people in her house with curiosity. "Mr. Sterling, why are there so many people here?" "Because people care about you, honey." Dr. Patricia was visibly irritated. "This is turning into a circus. We need to enforce the court order." "And we need to make sure it's enforced correctly," said Braulio, who had just returned with more documents. "I managed to contact the judge who signed this order. He agreed to meet with all parties tomorrow morning for a hearing." "Tomorrow? But the order is for today." "The order can be suspended if there's a formal questioning of procedure." "And there is." Braulio showed the papers he had brought. "I filed a formal objection based on procedural irregularities." Sandra looked at Dr. Patricia nervously. "What do we do now?" Before the lawyer could answer, one more person arrived at the house. It was Evan Smith, but not with the usual hostility. He seemed embarrassed and hesitant. "Evan," Walter said, surprised. "Walter, I need to talk to you, in private." "Now's not a good time." "It's about the anonymous complaint," Evan said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The silence in the room was total. Dr. Patricia leaned forward. "Do you know something about the complaint?" Evan looked around the room, seeing all eyes fixed on him. His expression showed a man struggling with his own conscience. I made the complaint." The admission caused an uproar in the room. Jim stood up abruptly. Myrtes covered her mouth in shock, and Walter felt a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Why?" Father Michael asked. "Because I was angry, jealous." Evan ran his hands over his face. "You seemed so united, so happy. And I have 2 kids who barely talk to me, a wife who's always complaining, a business that's doing badly because I spent too much time trying to hurt others." Izzy, who had observed everything, let go of Father Michael and walked up to Evan. "Are you sad?" The innocent question made Evan kneel down to be at her level. "I am, little one. Very sad." "Why did you do something to separate me from my family?" "Because I was foolish. Because I thought if you weren't happy, I would feel better." Evan looked at Walter. "But I only felt worse." Dr. Patricia interrupted the moment. "Mr. Smith, are you saying that you made a false complaint?" "It wasn't exactly false. I really thought the situation was irregular." Evan stood up. "But now, seeing all of you here, seeing how much you care about Izzy, I realize I was wrong." Sandra sighed deeply. "If the complaint was motivated by personal issues and not by genuine concern for the child's well-being, then the procedures based on it can be questioned," Braulio completed. Father Michael spoke up. "Dr. Patricia, Sandra, you can see for yourselves that this child is surrounded by love and care. Wouldn't it be more productive to work to regularize the situation than to separate a family?" "What do you suggest?" asked Dr. Patricia, who seemed to be losing her initial conviction. "That you do a proper assessment. Talk to Izzy in private. Visit the house, talk to neighbors, doctors, teachers. See the reality of the situation before making drastic decisions. Mirtes stepped forward. And in the meantime, Izzy stays here, at home, where she's safe and happy. It was Izzy who delivered the final blow to the authorities' resistance. She approached Sandra with her disarming sincerity. "Aunt Sandra, can you stay for lunch? Aunt Carr makes very good food. Then you can see how happy our family is." The simplicity of the invitation, coming from a child who moments before was being threatened with removal, deeply touched Sandra. She looked around the room, at the adults who clearly loved that girl, at the neighbors who had come to support them, at the father who defended the family, even at the man who had confessed his complaint. "Doctor, Patricia," she said finally, "I think we should reconsider our approach." "How so?" "This child is clearly well cared for and loved. Maybe we should work to formalize the situation instead of destroying it." Dr. Patricia looked at Izzy, who was watching her with hope in her big eyes. "Very well, let's do this. We'll temporarily suspend the removal order. We'll do a full assessment of the situation over the next week. If everything is really in order, it will be," Walter assured. "Then we'll work to find a legal solution that benefits Izzy." The relief in the room was palpable. Izzy ran to Walter, who picked her up, both too emotional to speak. "And now?" Jim asked. "Now," said Braulio, "we're going to prepare for tomorrow's hearing. And we're going to show the judge that this family, unconventional as it is exactly what Izzy needs." Evan, who had been quiet after his confession, approached Walter. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness." "Everyone has the right to ask for forgiveness," Walter interrupted, "and everyone deserves a second chance." "Thank you." Evan looked at Izzy. "Little one, forgive me for almost ruining your family?" Izzy smiled. "I forgive you. But now you have to become our friend, okay?" "Okay." When all the authorities and neighbors left, the family gathered in the living room to process everything that had happened. Izzy was sitting on Walter's lap, still a little shaken by the day's events. "Mr. Sterling, they're not going to come back to take me, are they?" "No, honey. We're going to sort everything out properly, and you're going to stay with us forever." "Promise?" "I promise." But even with all the promises and victories of the day, everyone knew that tomorrow's hearing would be decisive. The future of Izzy, and the family she had created around her, depended on them being able to convince a judge that love sometimes matters more than legal conventions. That night, while Izzy slept surrounded by everyone who loved her, each adult in the house knew they would need to fight the fight of their lives the next day. The day of the hearing dawned cloudy in Willow Creek, as if the sky itself reflected the tension that hung over the family. Izzy woke up earlier than usual and found all the adults already gathered in the kitchen, dressed in their best clothes and with serious expressions. "Why is everyone dressed up?" she asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Today we're going to talk to a very important judge about our family," Walter explained, picking her up. "He's going to decide if you can continue living with us. And if he says I can't, then we'll explain to him why he should say yes," replied Jim, stroking his daughter's hair. Carmela had prepared a special breakfast, but no one could eat much. Anxiety filled the air, and even Rodrigo, normally relaxed, was quiet and thoughtful. "Mr. Sterling," said Izzy, "can I take my drawings to show the judge?" "You can, honey." She ran to the room and returned with a makeshift folder full of her drawings. "I'm going to show him how happy our family is." At 9 in the morning, they set off towards the courthouse in Albany, where the hearing would be held. Braulio had spent the night studying legal precedents and preparing arguments, while Mirtes organized a folder with all the medical documents and follow-up reports on Izzy. The courthouse was an imposing building that intimidated Izzy at first. "It's very big," she murmured, squeezing Walter's hand. "Important places are sometimes big," he said, "but what matters are the people who are inside." In the courtroom, they found Dr. Howard Carter, the judge responsible for the case. He was a man of 60 years old, grey hair, glasses, and a serious but not hostile expression. Dr. Patricia was present, as were Sandra Oliveira and a prosecutor they had called to represent Izzy's interests. "Good morning, everyone," said the judge when everyone had settled in. "We are here to discuss the situation of the minor Izzy Santos and determine the best arrangement for her well-being." Izzy was sitting between Walter and Jim, watching everything with curiosity. The judge noticed her and smiled gently. "And you must be Izzy." "Hey, dear?" "Hi, Your Honor," she replied politely. "Your Honor," began Braulio, "I would like to present our formal objection to the removal order. As I will demonstrate, that order was based on irregular procedures and incorrect information." Over the next hour, Braulio methodically presented all the arguments. The complaint motivated by personal issues, the lack of a proper home assessment, Izzy's evident well-being, and above all, the child's right to remain in an environment where she was clearly happy and safe. "Your Honor," he said, "we are not here defending an irregular situation. We are asking you to recognize a family that, although unconventional, works perfectly." The prosecutor spoke up. "Your Honor, although the minor's situation seems stable, we cannot ignore the legal issues. There is no formal custody documentation, there is no established kinship with most of the caregivers, and this creates a legal vulnerability for the child." It was then that the judge addressed Izzy directly. "Izzy, can I ask you a few questions?" "You can." "Do you like living with these people?" "I like it a lot. They take very good care of me." "And who are they to you?" Izzy looked around the room before answering. "Mr. Sterling is like a grandpa who saved me when I was on the street. Aunt Myrtis is like a mama who takes care of my health. Daddy Jim is my real daddy. Aunt Car is like a second mama, and Bro Ro is my big brother." "That's a lot of people taking care of you. Doesn't it get confusing?" "No, it's good to have a lot of people who love me. So if one person is sad, there's always another to make me smile." The answer visibly touched the judge. "And are you afraid of anything?" "Only that you'll send me away from my family." "Why are you afraid of that?" "Because before they found me, I was alone and scared. Now I'm not afraid of anything anymore." At that moment, Izzy got up and picked up her folder of drawings. "Can I show you my drawings, Your Honor?" "Of course." She approached the judge's desk and began to show her drawings, explaining each one with the enthusiasm of a child proud of her work. "This is me when I was on the street. See how sad I am." She showed a drawing of a little girl alone in the rain. "And this is me now." The second drawing showed the same girl surrounded by several people, all smiling. "See the difference?" The judge studied the drawings carefully. "I do. Do you feel happier now?" "Much more. And you know why?" Izzy leaned forward, as if to tell a secret. "Because family isn't just who's born together. Family is who chooses to stay together." Izzy's childish wisdom created a touching silence in the room. The judge took off his glasses and cleaned them carefully before continuing. "Dr. Sanders," he addressed the biological father, "what is your position in this situation?" "Your Honor, I want to be a part of my daughter's life, but I don't want to destroy the family she found. These people saved her when I didn't even know she existed. My proposal is that we work together to formalize a shared custody." "And do you agree to that?" he asked Walter and Myrtis. "Completely," Walter replied. "We only want what's best for Izzy." "And you, Myrtis?" "Your Honor, as a nurse, I can attest that I have never seen a child recover so well from trauma as Izzy has recovered. And as a woman who lost a daughter, I can say that taking care of her gave me back a purpose that I thought I had lost forever." The judge made some notes before continuing. "Dr. Patricia, after following this hearing, what is your recommendation?" The lawyer hesitated. "Your Honor, I must admit that the situation is very different from what we expected to find. The child is clearly well cared for and emotionally stable." "And what is your recommendation?" that we seek a legal solution that allows the continuation of this situation with the proper formalizations. Sandra Oliveira agreed. From the point of view of the child's well-being, I see no reason for drastic changes. The judge stood up and walked to the window, reflecting for a few minutes. When he turned again, his expression had softened. In 30 years of career, I have seen many cases of custody disputes. I have seen biological families who mistreated children and strangers who loved them unconditionally. I have seen legally perfect situations that were emotionally disastrous, and irregular situations that were true homes. He returned to his desk. What I see here today is a child who was saved by a man who carried his own scars, cared for by a nurse who found purpose in helping her, rediscovered by a father who never knew of her existence, and surrounded by a family that chose each other. Izzy listened attentively, as if she understood that something very important was being decided. Therefore, continued the judge, I determine that Izzy Santos remains under the shared custody of Jim Sanders, her biological father, and Walter Sterling as her affective father, with Mirtes Silva as responsible for health care. All housing and care arrangements will continue as they are, with monthly monitoring by Child Protective Services for 6 months. The room exploded in hugs and tears of relief. Izzy ran to the judge and hugged him, surprising him. Thank you for letting me stay with my family. Thank you for teaching me that family is who chooses to stay together, he replied emotionally. When they left the courthouse, the sun had appeared between the clouds, illuminating the way back home. Izzy held the hands of Walter and Jim, jumping with happiness. Now we're a real family on paper too, she asked. Now we're a real family in every way, Walter replied. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. When they arrived home, they found a crowd in front of the house. It was the neighbors, some local merchants, Father Michael, and even Evan Smith, all waiting to celebrate the victory. How did you all know? Mirtes asked. Well, in a small town, good news travels as fast as bad news, Father Michael replied, smiling. And so, the most unlikely family in Willow Creek finally won not only legal recognition, but also the complete acceptance of their community. 6 months after the hearing, the landscape of Willow Creek had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Izzy's family had moved to a rural property on the outskirts of town. A large, welcoming house with flower-filled gardens, an orchard in the back, and enough space for everyone to live comfortably. It was a spring morning when Izzy, now 5 years old, ran through the yard chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing across the property. Her heart, completely healed by surgery, allowed her to play without limitations for the first time in her life. "Mr. Sterling, Aunt Mirtes, come see," she shouted, pointing to the garden where they had planted sunflowers that now bloomed magnificently. Walter came out of the porch where he was having coffee with Jim, planning the next projects for the property. The two men had developed a sincere friendship, united by their shared love for Izzy and the mutual respect that had grown over the months. "What is it, my flower?" Walter asked, using the affectionate nickname he had created for her. "The sunflowers are gigantic, bigger than me." Mirtes arrived from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. She had married Walter 2 months earlier in a simple but moving ceremony where Izzy was the proudest flower girl in the world. "That's because you took care of them with so much love," Mirtes said, hugging the girl, "just like we take care of you." Life in the new house had found a perfect rhythm. Jim and Carmela had bought a smaller house in town, but spent most of their time on the property. Rodrigo, now 16, had become the most dedicated brother Izzy could wish for, teaching her to ride a bike, play soccer, and make kites. Braulio had moved permanently from Albany, opening a law office in Willow Creek. His reconciliation with Walter had deepened, and he discovered that having Izzy as an adopted sister had brought a joy he didn't know was missing in his life. Even Gil had found his place in the expanded family. After resolving his legal issues related to the accident 30 years ago, receiving community service and psychological counseling, he had moved to a nearby house and become Izzy's favorite uncle for adventures and games. "Daddy Jim," Izzy called when she saw her father arriving with a mysterious box in his hands. "What's in there?" "A surprise for you," he said, smiling, "but you can only open it if you promise to take good care of it." Izzy opened the box carefully, and her eyes widened when she saw a golden retriever puppy sleeping peacefully. "A puppy?" "It's a girl. You can choose the name," Jim said. "I'm going to call her Hope," Izzy decided immediately, because she arrived when our family became complete. That afternoon, as if it were a sign of destiny, they received an unexpected visit. Father Michael arrived accompanied by a child that Izzy recognized immediately. It was Miguel, a 6-year-old boy she had seen a few times, asking for food in Harmony Park. "Miguel!" Izzy exclaimed, running to hug the shy boy. "What are you doing here?" "Miguel is going through a difficult situation," Father Michael explained to the adults. "His parents were arrested for abandonment, and he has no close relatives. Child Protective Services is looking for a temporary family." Walter and Mirtes exchanged glances, immediately understanding the implicit suggestion. Izzy, with her natural sensitivity, realized that something important was happening. "Can Miguel stay with us?" she asked. "We have a lot of space, and he can sleep in Bro Ro's room when he's not here." "Izzy," Walter said gently, "taking care of another child is a big responsibility." "But you took care of me when I was alone," she interrupted. "And look how well it turned out." Jim knelt beside Miguel. "What do you think, champ?" Would you like to stay here with us for a while?" Miguel, who had remained silent, looked around the property, saw Izzy holding his hand with affection, and finally whispered, "Can I really?" "Of course you can," said Mirtes, already decided. "There's always room for one more child in a family that has a lot of love to give." 3 months later, Miguel's adoption was being finalized officially. The property had become a true home for children in need of care, with Izzy proudly taking on the role of older and protective sister. It was during Miguel's 5th birthday party that the biggest surprise of all happened. Evan Smith arrived accompanied by his wife and children, carrying a gift and an expression of sincere joy. "Evan," Izzy said, running to greet him, "you came to Miguel's party." "Of course I came." "You're our friends now," he replied, surprising himself with the sincerity of the words. During the months following the hearing, Evan had undergone a profound personal transformation. Inspired by the example of Izzy's family, he had begun to repair his own family relationships and had become one of the most fervent supporters of the social project that the family had created. "Walter," he said, pulling him into a private conversation, "I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "How about turning this place into an official foundation, a place where vulnerable children can find temporary or permanent families?" Evan looked around the property. "I have some contacts who could help with funding." The idea was ambitious, but perfectly aligned with what they were already doing informally. Over the following year, the Izzy Foundation was officially established, offering not only temporary shelter for children in need, but also psychological, educational, and medical support. Izzy, now 6 years old, had become the unofficial ambassador of the foundation, receiving each new child with the same affection she had received from Walter that afternoon in Harmony Park. "Remember when you found me at the church?" she asked Walter one night as he put her to bed. "I remember. It was the most important day of my life." "Why?" "Because it was when I learned that sometimes the person we think we're saving is the one who really saves us." Izzy smiled, snuggling into the blankets. "Mr. Sterling?" "Yes?" "I think God has a very good plan for families, doesn't he?" "I think so, my flower. A very good plan." Outside the room, Mirtes, Jim, Braulio, Gil, Carmela, and Rodrigo gathered on the porch of the big house, watching the stars over Willow Creek. Hope, the golden retriever, slept at the feet of Miguel, who had adapted to the family as if he had always belonged there. "Who would have thought that a 4-year-old girl could change so many lives?" Braulio commented. "It wasn't just her," said Gil. "It's what happens when people decide to choose love instead of fear. And when they decide that family is something you build, not something you inherit," added Jim. Walter observed the property illuminated by the full moon. The big house where they now lived, the gardens that Izzy had helped plant, the playground they had built for the children, and above all, the people who had become his family through conscious choices of love and dedication. "You know what impresses me the most?" said Mirtes, snuggling up to her husband. "How something that started with so much suffering ended up creating so much happiness." "Maybe that's how it works," Walter replied. "Maybe happiness is sweeter when we know the taste of pain." That night, under the starry sky of New York, a family that had formed through tragedies and disagreements quietly celebrated the victory of love over all adversities. Izzy slept peacefully, knowing that she would wake up surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally, while in the next room, Miguel dreamed of the security of finally finding a home. And so, the girl who had offered her last piece of bread to a stranger on the sidewalk of a church continued to multiply love, proving that the simplest gestures can generate the most extraordinary miracles. The family that was born from the compassion of a 4-year-old became an example that, when love guides decisions, even the most unlikely stories can have the most beautiful endings. In Willow Creek, the name of Izzy became synonymous with hope, and her story would continue to inspire families for many generations, reminding everyone that sometimes angels arrive disguised as lost children, just waiting for someone to have enough courage to reach out and accept the miracle. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.